Welcome to Mysteries, Monsters, and Mayhem.
I'm Shannon Lawrence.
And I'm MB Partlow.
Quick content warning before we get started. This podcast may contain language and disturbing content, so enter at your own risk.
Hi. Hello. I brought back a classic.
Well, it did have a fan, so...
At least one.
I think I mentioned that I was going to be at a con, but who knows on here? I just don't know. There's always something. I went to Mile High Con and had a whole adventure with my Jeep dying in the middle of a blizzard and sitting there for 3 hours in a Jeep that you could not turn on to have heat while buses got really close to me because I broke down right in front of a bus depot. And
I like the fact that they didn't bother to see if you needed any help.
not until the end. And I thought about it after that. Because the guy came, so for people out there, I got mild hypothermia. And that was because I did not accept help as early as I should have. But at the same time, I thought a fucking tow truck was coming.
Right.
At some point. And then I finally had to abandon my vehicle, which sucked. But my sister came and got me, and another friend who was at the con helped me tow the Jeep into a parking lot so I wasn't just on the street. But I got mild hypothermia. At the end, I finally had two people there helping me. One of the bus drivers came over and said, I noticed you've been here a few hours, and I thought I'd come over. And I was like, how about a few hours ago?
Yeah.
I could have sat on your bus because they would sit there for a bit before they'd move out.
And warmed up.
And I was like, I could have gotten warm on the bus or something, you know? So anyway, he came over and he was like, we could help you push it. And I was like, you came over while we were hooking up tow straps, so I think you're a little late. So then he took over the tow straps and he put them on there and did that. And I was like, cool.
How nice of him.
And then as I was being pulled, he disappeared. He was gone. It was such a weird situation.
Such an adventure.
Anyway, at the con, I had a couple people come up to me, so I want to do shout outs, who didn't realize when they saw my name on the panel who I was, but they were listeners. And so that was so awesome. It was such a great experience. So I want to do a shout out to Bill and Tanya, and that hello was for Tanya.
Oh, okay. I was so thrilled when you wrote about people talking to you about the podcast. It was a vicarious thrill for me.
Yeah.
I was just like, oh my God, people we don't know.
And then I was on a panel with somebody, Kim. So shout out to Kim, who was like,
nice.
oh, you're that Shannon. I listened to your podcast on the show. So that was fun.
You know what? I forgot. So I have a couple of friends who are listening to it. One is just randomly, I think, listens to the new ones and is working backward. And the other one started at the beginning.
Oh, okay.
And I forgot how much we talked about food and the restaurants in the beginning. Because she was all, this is great. I'm always writing down places that you guys are talking about. I said, well, now that you know me, if you ever just call me or message me, nobody calls anymore, but text me, I will answer. Because I said something about purple onion and the wings that aren't on the menu. And she goes, oh, you talked about that on the podcast. And I was like, 1,000 years ago. Yes,
right. I know. I was on one of my panels was how to start a podcast type thing. And one of the questions was what did you learn? That you had to, did you make mistakes in the beginning that you wish and it was yeah.
No,
if anybody says they didn't, then
they're lying.
I guess bully for them, but
they're lying.
And my big one was, we talked too much in the beginning.
Yep.
And I said, but in our defense, we were doing this because it was a pandemic and we weren't getting to talk to or see anybody at all. So we would sit there and talk forever and then do the crime.
And I will say at that point in time, we did get feedback from a lot of people that we knew who did enjoy listening to us banter.
Yes, but then some did say, you might want to cut down a little shorter.
And they were correct.
So
they were correct.
They were. At that point, I did not want to hear it, though. It put my back up. So, yeah. And also, we have a new supporter. And so I wanted to, on Buy Me a Coffee. They have been supporting us since the beginning.
Yes.
So, Linda Shappett just wanted to do a shout.
Yay!
Is a true crime addict. So, thank you so much, Linda. Is that all my shout outs for this time?
I have nothing. You looked at me like I was supposed to have something intelligent to say, and I'm like, I am sorry, I am not your smart friend today. I'm running about I got a time lag in my brain.
There's a time lag. So I watched something that's on, I want to say Hulu, and it's called Quiz Show Girl or something like that. It has Awkwafina and Sandra Oh.
Yes, I have heard of it, and I want to watch it because I love them both.
It was fun, but here, the most amusing part is that Sandra Oh is playing the goofy character, and Awkwafina's playing like the straight man.
I love that.
In terms of humor. So I was like, this is fantastic. I love seeing Sandra Oh being this ridiculous. Because, yes. I mean, and the whole reason I liked Sandra Oh in the first place was I discovered her on Grey's Anatomy, which is probably where a lot of people first discovered her. Yeah. And her character was my favorite character because she was just so
Christina
blasé.
Yang.
And yes.
Oh my God. Where did I pull that out of?
And I just loved like their interactions because they were the non-emotional. In TVs and movie and books and everything, the standard female is the emotional, over-emotional, you know, like...
Yes.
And they embraced something that was so much closer to my personality than I have seen in anything else, right? And so I loved that, and Sandra Oh was my favorite. But seeing her flip that, because she often does play that very serious kind of
And she was also in... What was the other series she just did?
Oh,
with the female serial killer.
Yeah, I don't remember, but I do know.
That was good too.
It was.
But again, she was very serious in that as well.
And so in this, she's got like a little purple streaks in her hair, and she's kind of a fuck up, and it was great.
I'm glad to hear that because I can't wait to watch that.
Yeah. And we also watched the new Haunted Mansion, and it was very cute too.
Was it?
There was a hell of a like crew, like the people in it.
Yes.
What is it? Tiffany Haddish. Is that her name? Yeah. Rosario Dawson. I was really weirded out by Rosario Dawson just playing like the normal proper mom though.
Oh.
That is not what I expect from her and stuff. And I was like, well, first of all, I get that she's now the age where you're going to make her the mom all the frickin' time. Yep. But hey, she chose it. So she must have wanted to be in that role. So that's fine.
I'm sure they let her read
I struggled with it. And it's not because she's a good actress. It's not because of that. I was just like, I am not willing to accept this.
That would be like for me seeing Molly Ringwald playing the mom.
And she has.
She has, but
Cassandra Peterson played the mom in something recently.
Did she?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I don't remember what it was.
There's another actress who I'm not going to name, but who played a mom, and every time she was not like the main character. She was a side character. But every time she was on the screen, I said, I don't believe that woman has ever birthed a child or raised a child or had touched a child with a 10-foot pole. It was just completely unbelievable.
That's how Jeff feels about Mila Kunis in Bad Moms.
Bad Moms?
First of all, her hair and her makeup are perfect the entire time, no matter what's happening, even when spaghetti is all over her.
Okay, that's true.
And he said, that is not representative of what a mom is going through. It actually really annoys him because he's like, no, she doesn't get to just be perfect through everything. Yeah. I was like, what are you saying? I'm not perfect?
He's saying no other woman could live up to your standard.
That's right.
That is what he is saying.
That's how he feels. So... but no, Haunted Mansion was, and there are some cameos that made me so happy. Good. And I don't want to throw them out, even though people could look up who's in it. And I don't know, maybe it's in a preview or something. I didn't even see a preview beforehand, but they were so fun to me that I would like people to be surprised if they don't.
I've been wanting to watch it ever since I saw a review that was like, hey, this is kind of good.
Oh, is it? I hadn't heard anything about it, but it was on Disney Plus, and we needed a family movie night. Well, not.
I've lost my ability to get into Disney Plus, so.
Okay. It was good. I'm sure it'll pop out onto, I don't know, Disney Plus though. They like to keep all their shit like.
I will try again. Close. I was on the phone and trying to get in. It was not working well, so. Yes, I used my daughter's login for Disney Plus and it stopped working. And she's like, well, fuck, I don't know what my login is. That could be part of my problem.
In the machine. I know. I was offered like a laptop for work. I would have to return it when the time came that I quit, and I was like, but I have all my passwords and stuff saved in here. I don't figure that all out again. How sad is that?
Did I tell you I got a writing assignment?
No.
Like a paid writing assignment?
Nice.
Freelance? I was shocked. And I went, so I got this, I did some writing for the Best Of, the Independence Best Of. And the editor messaged me, thanks, and acknowledged getting my invoice. And he goes, do you want to write these 2 articles for the Business Journal? And I thought about it, and I was like, that's not as much money as you paid me for the Best Of. And he goes, oh, okay, we'll meet that rate then.
Okay.
And I went,
nice.
oh, shit, I guess I got to do
Guess I'm going to do it then.
And are you holding on to whatever you hold on to? Do you know what I did today?
Hold your ass.
Hold your ass. I wrote a short story.
Wow. Are you going to submit it?
I think I'm going to marinate on it for a day or 2 first.
Yeah.
I mean, probably not. That wasn't why I did it, but
okay.
I might. It's full of very purple prose intentionally.
Gotcha.
It is very overwrought and full of all that dripping detail. And I just kind of did it as an exercise to do it and dump all that out of my head. But I did it as a start, as an end. It's based on a poem.
A poem?
A poem. You're looking at
Daniel
me like
Levy or something.
You're looking at me like, who the fuck are you?
What's happening?
I don't know. I'm getting tattoos. I'm writing short stories based on poems.
OMs. I guess that's more. What is it? Mora or whatever her name is. Moira
Rose.
Poems.
Bebes.
Bebes. Daniel Levy was in something recently, and Jeffrey was like, you love him, don't you? Because you start laughing the moment he comes on screen. Yep. He hasn't even done anything funny yet. And I was like, that's true. I really love him.
He is hilarious. He's absolutely hilarious.
Yes, he's fabulous. So
he could do no wrong. I adore him.
I liked his father fine, but I adore him.
Yes. His father is very, very funny as well.
Oh, yeah. And I watched Second City TV, SCTV, and the problem is I've reached a point now where I'm like, I'll think of something from skit or something. I'm like, shit, which sketch show was that on?
Yep.
I watched Laugh-In. I watched SCTV, Saturday Night Live, Mad TV, In Living Color. Yes. And I think I tried out a couple others, but they didn't stick.
Not this weekend. Last weekend, there was a comedian who was the host on Saturday Night Live. I cannot remember his name. It might have been Nate something, so I will have to look that up. It was the funniest episode of Saturday Night Live I've seen in years. This guy was fucking hilarious from his opening monologue. Pretty much, I think the last skit of the night, I was kind of like, but everything else made me laugh out loud. Okay, that's a low bar. I mean, I'm an easy laugh, but
I've seen some skits going. I don't watch Saturday Night Live anymore, but I've seen some skits going around from Pedro Pascal being on.
Yes, I did watch that
those
one.
Look pretty damn funny.
Yes.
He lost it like in a one where they're all cutting their steaks really hard and then like the whole table's shaking and the things are spilling and he's supposed to be talking very seriously and he just couldn't. Oh, and I watched Carol Burnett. Of course I watched Carol Burnett. It's the first one I ever watched.
Carol Burnett was wonderful.
Right. But now I'm all, what is this, bro? I think that the one I was thinking of was, it was like a colonel or something, like a German military dude, and he would stand up out of bushes or something and say, interesting, but stupid.
Artie Johnson.
Artie Johnson. Because at first I went Henry Gibson, and I went, that was not Henry Gibson.
Very interesting.
But stupid. So.
Yep, that was Laugh-In.
And I was pretty sure that was Laugh-In, but I was
correct.
And what's the guy's name? It wasn't Henry Gibson.
Great. I had one brain cell left today. You just used it on Artie Johnson.
I think Henry Gibson was my favorite on that show.
Oh my God.
Ruth Buzzy stuck out a lot, but I don't think she was my favorite. But damn, I can sure remember the shit she did.
And Joanne Worley.
Oh, yes.
And Lily Tomlin.
Oh, yeah, of course. But I was already like a big Lily Tomlin person.
I love the telephone operator, Ernestine.
And the little girl, Ernestine.
Yes. And that's the truth. Notice I turned my head so I did not inadvertently spit on you.
That's great.
So,
all right, do you want to start?
I will start. So, this one is just, the further I got into it, the more fucked up it was. I mean, you think you know the story, and then they're like, but wait, what about? And I got a phone call one morning from my friend Dan, and I'm like, what, Dan, is someone dead? You know, because people don't call anymore. He's like, oh my God, have you heard about, and he's telling me about the murder. And I was like, no. And he goes, it was in the mid-'80s. And he goes, satanic. I said, yeah, satanic panic. Everything in the mid-'80s was satanic panic. So, but then I started looking into it. And I was like, okay, it is really interesting. And one of the things that got me was, that got me interested in it is the young woman involved. It's just like a few months younger than I am. So it was like we had parallel lives. Mm-hmm. Well, we were doing the same thing at the same time, except for the whole killing your parents thing. I wasn't doing that.
Spoiler.
So it was April 3rd, 1985. The local Virginia news director heard the police call go out that they needed officers on site, dead body. But he recognized the address. It was one of his neighbors. It was somebody he knew well, someone he knew socially. There had been a wellness check requested for Derek W.R. Haysom and Nancy Astor Benedict Haysom by a friend who hadn't been able to get in touch with them for a couple of days. Now, here's a fun fact. I got lots of fun facts in this one. Her middle name was Astor because the family was related to Lady Astor, who was the first female member of Parliament. Okay. So she always went by Nancy Astor, whatever last name she was using. She had been married previously. Derek was president of the Sydney Steel Corporation. He was originally from South Africa, but now had Canadian citizenship. Not sure why he had Canadian citizenship and was living in Virginia, but that's okay. Nancy was an artist. They lived in a big sprawling house in Lynchburg, Virginia, and they were kind of considered socialites. Mm-hmm. They were hobnobbers. They belonged to the country club. They were very social, went to lots of parties, had lots of friends. And together they had 5 children from previous marriages. Nancy had 2 sons. Derek had 2 sons and a daughter. And together they had 1 daughter, Elizabeth Haysom. Listening to the descriptions of Elizabeth from the documentary were fucking hilarious to listen to now because they have clips that were recorded then.
Okay.
She wore all black. I was like, so she's goth or she's depressed. Who cares? She had short, spiky hair.
Oh.
And I was like, and I thought, and then I got thinking about it and I'm like, that was not unusual at that time.
It wasn't?
To have short, no, because I had roommates in college who had short hair.
Yeah.
Short, spiky hair. She obviously was a witch because of that. She probably showed her ankles even.
Oh, shit.
She was described as being close to her parents and reportedly had a bubbly personality despite her punk persona. And then, so that's how they start this whole documentary out. And then you get into it and I'm like, I failed to see the bubbly personality here. But so when authorities entered the home, they found the couple on the floor. The mom is in the kitchen. The dad is in the dining room, which is adjacent. Their throats have been slashed and they've both been stabbed numerous times. And the bodies had been there for a couple of days. Now, as we know, how do we describe if someone has their throat slashed? Nearly decapitated. But apparently they were very, very deep wounds.
Yeah.
And then, stabbed. So the police who were securing the scene called it a slaughterhouse because there's all these newscasts from back in 85 in the documentary because of all the blood. Some of the guys who they're interviewing, okay, they have little clips of them back then, but they're interviewing them in present day. And a couple of them they still get shaky when they talk about it.
Yeah.
Because there were only 2 dead people, but there was so much fucking blood everywhere. And Derek had been stabbed 36 times. Nancy had her throat cut from behind so deep that she wore a thick gold chain. The one guy said it was as big around as his pinky. The gold chain was like stuck inside her esophagus. That's how deep the cut was. The authorities took over 1,000 pictures of the crime scene and then sent them on to Richmond, where they would be processed. And apparently the satanic experts in Richmond, I gotta go, who knew that's where they were, looked over the photos and found lots of evidence of satanic involvement. So here's the thing. And you can watch this documentary. If you're interested in the case, I highly suggest that you do because I would have to talk for 3 hours to include everything. It was hard because these are pictures. It's not a movie. This is people's blood that you're looking at and so much of it. And it was really graphic and it's just in your face. So while they're talking about the satanic involvement, they're showing the pictures and describing what they see in the pictures. I couldn't see it. Oh. I could not see what they were talking about. There's obviously a 666 here and I'm looking at it going, what? No, I can't. It's like there was a circular pattern in the blood, like...
Satanic panic.
Yeah.
They were so... You see, I forget what the term for it is, but you see what you want to see.
Yes, I know. Yes. And it wasn't just in the U.S. That's what killed me. The satanic panic pretty much went around the globe.
Yeah.
Let's blame everything on Satan. So yes, I talked about the satanic panic. Now I got to skip ahead in my notes. If there's blood on the floor and nobody is caught standing over the body, Satan has to be involved. So it was a difficult case because there were no clues. The police had really no clues and no motives why anyone would want to kill this couple. There were some, I mean, he was a big deal businessman, and they were like, certainly there were other business people who didn't like him, but nobody had a vendetta against him. Mm-hmm. And she was an artist. There was no forced entry. Nancy's purse was found, wallet intact, full of money. Nothing was missing. Nothing was stolen. They found blood in the bathroom, which indicated someone had showered or cleaned up in there. At first, they talked about it like they'd showered. Then they talked about it like they'd cleaned up in the sink. So I'm not sure. Might have been some of both, cleaned up in the sink and in the shower. But it was obviously someone who felt, as they pointed out, it was someone who felt comfortable knowing I've got time to get in the shower and clean all this off me before anybody comes.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to catch me. And they had over a dozen investigators working the case. So Elizabeth, the youngest child, who was in college at this time, she organized the funeral for her parents. She read a Bible verse during the memorial service. She had her family supporting her because she had her half siblings supporting her. She had neighbors, she had cousins, she had aunts and uncles. One investigator noted, and this was hindsight, that she didn't have much emotional reaction. But we've talked about that plenty. Some people don't. And when you're in shock, you often don't. Uh-huh. You shut down. You don't have one. So when the police asked...
And sometimes you're a psychopath.
Sometimes you're a psychopath. So when police asked her about her whereabouts, Elizabeth said that she and her boyfriend, Jens Soering, who was the son of a German diplomat, had rented a car and gone sightseeing in Washington, D.C. They were both at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville. They both had scholars. They both had some fancy scholarship. They were both highly intelligent, and they met when they moved into the dorms. There's a couple of they both have a slightly different take on how they met, but it's the day they moved into the dorms. They agree on that. He says they were moving in and there was this glorious goddess of a woman who he started talking to, who was Elizabeth's roommate. And that's how he met Elizabeth. And she says they met at a barbecue for scholarship students. Doesn't matter. They met the first day they moved into the dorms. And she was 21 and he was 18.
Okay.
So when Jens described her, he talked about how different she looked and what made her stand out with her short, spiky hair. He also commented that she smoked, which nobody else did. And I have to call bullshit because mid-'80s, fucking everybody was smoking. Yeah. College students, hello. Yeah. I mean...
They were all doing cocaine too. I don't know what's happening here.
No, she was doing heroin, actually. But but they smoked like fucking chimneys. There was nobody smoked, so that made her a cool kid. No, Jens, it did not.
No.
He also commented that he was captivated by her accent, her aristocratic accent. So, because her mother was from Britain and her father was from South Africa, so it was a very distinctive and kind of a posh sounding accent. She said that when she met Jens, he came across as rude, brusque, and undeniably intelligent. They both think they're smarter than everybody.
Yeah.
So, I'm sorry. She was 20 to his 18. She wasn't 21 yet. He was like, and of course at that age, that's a very big difference. He lost his virginity to her. And that's a stupid saying. You lost your virginity. Did it fall behind the couch? It's just
Where is it? I can't find it. That implies you can find it.
Yeah. Okay, anyway. So could someone work on that? Okay, so Jens lost his virginity to Elizabeth. But she had this air of mystery and this worldly cachet about her because she had gone to boarding school in Europe and had a lesbian lover that she bragged about to everyone.
That was also just the 80s in college.
Right? I knew someone in college, not in college, I was in grad school. She was in college. She went home one weekend and told her mother, came out to her mother. She was a lesbian. Mom's like, cool, you be you. She came home like 2 months later and said, this is Dave, we're getting married. It's like, okay.
I feel like this guy was more repressed and naive as a teenager than I was like in elementary school during that era.
Okay, I will say that Elizabeth did write some pretty intense love poetry to Jens. Because some of it was read out.
That changes everything.
It does. I just went, shit, I couldn't write poetry like that at age. I couldn't write that poetry now. But I'm not a poet. A poet.
It's poems and poets.
Poets. Anyway, I shouldn't be laughing. This is not funny. A few days after the murder, police finally obtained the records for the rental car. This was, and it's almost shocking that they even looked at it. It was more like they were just checking it off the list than they thought they were going to find anything. DC was approximately 120 miles away, so it would have been a 240-mile round trip, but the car had over 600 miles put on it. So the police became suspicious of where the extra miles came from and told Elizabeth they wanted to speak with Jens, but he just somehow never called them back. They really let a lot of stuff go. Yeah, why didn't they march into his dorm room and...
Yeah.
But they didn't.
Well, if he's not calling us back, I guess
he must be busy.
We'll just move on.
So, here's how much time passed. It wasn't until Elizabeth returned to the college campus after summer break that the police came to see her again. And this time, they asked for her footprint and a sample of her blood. Because there was a sock footprint in the blood at her parents' home. So then they tracked down Jens and did the same thing. And they say that their impression of him at the time was that he was a stereotypical nerd. He was skinny. He had big, thick glasses. He was not inclined to cooperate with them. And he even cited his grandfather's experience with the Nazis to explain why he didn't want to talk to the police.
Oh, okay.
So, after the police get these footprints and the blood samples, Elizabeth and Jens fled the country. They flew into Paris, drove to Luxembourg, then Yugoslavia, then Italy. And I just have to tell you, if you watch the documentary, they have like an unfolded paper map of the world, and they pan across the ocean to England. And that through this whole thing, they're using this with the crease marks in it, this paper map. And I'm like, I'm not sure if I'm amused or irritated, but I think I'm going to be mostly amused.
High production values.
Yes. Then they flew from Austria to Thailand. Okay. So remember, they're college students. I was a college student at the same time. I couldn't afford a Greyhound bus ticket to Syracuse, but they flew to Thailand. They thought because Jens had been born in Thailand that they could get jobs off the books in Thailand and he could get citizenship, which did not work out. I can just imagine these two rich kids have no clue how to go about doing any of this. They did, however, manage to buy several forged IDs. Then they flew to Malaysia and back to England. Eventually, after 6 months, they ran out of money and found they couldn't easily get jobs. Really? What kind of jobs were they looking for?
Right. It wasn't they couldn't get jobs or they couldn't get ones they felt that were good enough for them.
Right.
Yeah.
6 months they lived in England without jobs.
Wow. Impressive.
Right? So they came to the attention of British authorities for writing bad checks.
Oh, that's how. It's not that impressive. They were just
so
okay.
When the British authorities picked them up, they found all these fake IDs. But they also found something very interesting that Jens and Elizabeth had been carrying around with them, which was letters. These are letters that they've been writing to each other over the course of their relationship. Who the fuck carries those around? You're on the lam,
when
for
you're
God's
living
sake.
together.
You're living together and you're on the lam. So let's carry these.
Was that like the early version of like texting your spouse or messaging them when they're in the same house or something like that? But instead they would just write a letter while they sat next to each other in the room.
Elizabeth had written to Jens that she hated living with her parents. She wrote things like, why can't they just lay down and die? Yeah, nice stuff. And then there were the responses that Jens wrote talking about how their love was the perfect weapon to fight her parents. So needless to say, this all fell apart for these two young people, because one man in the British police force decided he was going to read all of these letters. They had nothing. The letters had fucking nothing to do with the bad checks, which was what they were picked up for. But he's like, why the hell are they carrying these around? I'm going to read them. So he did. So as soon as he finished them, he called the authorities in the U.S. and he was like, do you know Jens and Elizabeth? Yeah. Yes, we do. We're looking for him. So do you know Elizabeth's parents? Well, we did. Are they dead? Yes, they are. He actually asked, are they dead? Have they been murdered? Yep. You got it in one. So the authorities in Virginia jumped on a plane, flew to London, where Jens and Elizabeth were questioned separately over the course of a few days. Jens eventually confessed, but as soon as he did, Elizabeth was quick to point out that she was equally involved and just as guilty as he was. So Elizabeth returned to the U.S. in May of 1987. While in custody in Great Britain, she had written to Jens and severed their relationship. She pled guilty. When she got here, she didn't even try to fight it. So she got to the sentencing trial pretty quickly. And if you want to see something horrific, watch the documentary. Because this was, if not the first, it was one of the first trials that was televised. So the camera is like 2 feet from her face while they're asking her these questions. And she's talking about what happened. What everyone wanted to know was why. Why? Okay, we get it. Why did you want to kill your parents? And her look had completely changed. She didn't have short hair. It was now long and pulled back. Sometimes it was French braided. She wore very long, modest dresses, very simple, plain colors. Mm-hmm. So she said that she and Jens were in love, and he was completely obsessed with her and jealous of anything and everything else in her life that wasn't him. Her parents, she said, thought he was beneath her, and he was angry her parents weren't providing for her and that she had to sell her jewelry. Did you have anything when you were 20 that you could have sold for money? I mean, no. Besides organs?
No, and I've been on my own for 2 years, right? And out of my parents' house, nope. Because most of our furniture was either handed over or like crates made into tables.
Yep.
And
doors made into tables.
Yeah.
I could possibly have pawned my class ring. That was it.
I didn't even do a class ring.
How much money do you think I would have gotten for that?
Right.
A pittance. So, she also hinted that she and Jens were fighting because of his performance issues in the bedroom.
Yikes.
So the story goes, he was so angry with her parents that he got into the car, drove all the way to their house to confront them, and killed them. She said she stayed in D.C. until Jens returned later that evening, and that when he returned, he instructed her to clean the blood out of the car, which she did. She then returned to the hotel room where he had showered and fallen asleep. And you'll be happy to know that she said that once he killed her parents, his impotence problems went away.
Oh, I'm very happy for them. Yeah.
She also testified that there's just so many stories. I'm like, just fucking pick one and stick with it. She claimed that her parents were very controlling and her mother would show up anytime, day or night, to check on her in the dorm room. And she was so then she was very, very reluctant to discuss this. But at the sentencing trial, the prosecutor brought up her previous statement that she'd had a sexual relationship with her mother. And she tried 10 ways from Sunday to not talk about it. And he kept saying, you said this. You testified to this. And he finally said something to the effect of, now is the time. You need to tell us. You either need to clear your mother's name and say, no, she did not do this, or you need to tell us that, yes, she sexually abused you. And she said no. Jens later testified that when she told him about the trauma she'd suffered at her mother's hands, she also showed him nude photos that her mother had taken of her. Just let that marinate on how fucking creepy that is.
Yeah.
and said that her father knew what was going on but refused to protect her. So this is a whole big basket of fucked up. So she said no, her mother did this. So second time on the stand, she said, no, my mother did not do this. It was part of a plan to get Jens wound up enough to protect her and take care of her parents.
Right.
So she was sentenced to 45 years on each of 2 counts of accessory before the fact to be served consecutively. Okay, so what about Jens? Meanwhile, his father is fighting extradition to the States because they all knew it would mean the death penalty. And basically, because he's in custody in England, England said, we will not release him to you if the death penalty is on the table. So it took a couple of years to get that cleared up. When they took that off as soon as that was off the table, they threw him in a plane and shipped him over here.
Yeah, because 1965 is when England took it off the table.
Something like that.
Yeah.
As soon as he took the stand, he said, no, I didn't kill Elizabeth's parents. First, did you do it? No, I did not. His story was that Elizabeth told him she owed a debt for drugs, so needed to pick up a package for a friend, drive it to Charlottesville, and come back while they were in D.C. And she had bragged previously about doing heroin. So she said he couldn't go with her. She had to go alone because, of course, they didn't know him, so they wouldn't trust him. So when she got back to the hotel, he said she told him she had killed her parents and that drugs had made her do it. So they decided together that to save her, he would take the blame because they figured he could use diplomatic immunity to escape punishment. Because his father was a diplomat. Okay. I'm just kind of
the
speechless.
Diplomatic immunity thing kills me. It shouldn't exist.
Well, it didn't apply to him in this case. So his lawyer focused on errors made by the police during the investigation. And there were lots. So there was hair found in the bathroom sink where someone had cleaned up. They compared that hair to Jens, which didn't match, never compared it to her. They allowed a piece of evidence to be destroyed because they just never asked for it. It was something from the hotel that Jens was apparently supposed to have signed. And they just never asked for it. So the hotel did whatever their policy was and got rid of it. His earlier confession came up because when he confessed the first time, he walked them through what he did. Where he went in the house, who stood where, all these exacting details. And these exacting details were spot on. There's a whole fucking thing I'm not even going to talk about movie tickets. And who bought the movie tickets. Because that was their cover. So did she go to the movie theater and buy 2 tickets? So it looked like they both went. Or did he go to the movie theater? Nobody knows. So then the issue of sexual abuse comes up again. And this time, on the stand, Elizabeth said yes, her mother did do that to her. So she's now changed her story twice. And I can't tell you if she did or she didn't.
No.
So despite his plea of not guilty, Jens was found guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms. They were both paroled in November of 2019, so they served just over 30 years. Both served just over 30 years. Elizabeth was deported back to Canada, and Jens was deported back to Germany. They did keep DNA evidence from the scene, and it was finally around this time or shortly before this, they tested the DNA evidence. None of the blood they found there was Jens. Then they got this whole theory about these 2 drifters, and that if she could work this intelligent young man into a state, surely she could have gotten 2 drifters to come in, and the blood didn't belong to the 2 drifters either. Just for the sake of argument. So Jens is and they've taken very different paths since getting out, while they were in jail and since they've gotten out. He'll talk to anybody with a microphone and a camera. And he was constantly sending stuff to the media. But apparently everybody agrees it was very polished and it was very packaged. And it was very much, here, I would like you to look at this piece of evidence while ignoring anything that didn't agree with what he was saying. She doesn't talk to anybody. She's gone to ground. She's not talking. They assume she's still in Canada. They don't know that for sure. And there's still even though they both did time and he was found guilty of manslaughter, there is no proof which one of them did it.
That's funny. With these couple things where the parents get killed, it's frequently, but not always, the one whose parents are killed that manipulates the other person into killing them.
Yes.
Doesn't mean in this case that's what it is. That's just what I've
we've seen that
most. So
it was just the contradictions and the grandstanding by the lawyer, good Southern lawyer, who liked to tuck his thumbs in the pockets of his vest and kind of puff his chest out.
Oh, good. Did he wear a bow tie?
He did not. He wore 3-piece suits.
All right.
So
well, I just next
sources. Till Murder Do Us Part. That is the name of the documentary. Of course, Wikipedia. And I have to also cite Dan as a source since he brought it to my attention. Like, my God, don't ever bring me anything this complicated again.
So I have to do a spoiler alert on this.
Oh, this one.
So I'm doing the Osage Indian murders, also known as the Reign of Terror. But for people who enjoy a movie or a book, it's the story that Killers of the Flower Moon is based on. So I have not read the book, nor have I seen the movie. So I imagine there's going to be spoilers for it. But this is a true crime that happened in 1920s.
You have the book.
I do have the book, okay. Yeah. So there you are. There's your warning. Stop listening if you don't want what likely will be some spoilers. Although I will say that in the articles that I was looking at that were newer, they did state that the movie tells you who the killers are right from the beginning. Like, you know who's responsible for the crimes already. So I am not going to be spoiling that. You're seeing them go through knowing who is doing what, and you're watching them do it. So you're not wondering in the movie if it's... But that is just from an article. And again, I can't guarantee it because I have not seen it. Because I don't think I will. Because it's really about the white dude. And this was not about the white dudes. Okay. The Osage had settled in the general region of eastern Kansas and Missouri, signing a treaty with the U.S. government in 1808. They sold their reservation land in Kansas to the U.S. government in 1865 and moved to Indian Territory. This was actually, they were kind of forced, but kind of chose it because things were bad up there in that area. And it was clear that the property was wanted. And they said, you know what? I've heard maybe we can move to Indian Territory and it's a better place for us. They'll get off our backs. And so they sold it. Using their funds from the sale of their land, they purchased their modern-day land from the Cherokee Nation for $1,099,137.41 on June 14th, 1883. Though, as far as I understand it, they had lived on that land since 1871 or 72. Like, they started migrating down there. That's why there's 2 years. Today, the nation's land is 1,472,559 acres. Interestingly, they had historically been neighbors once upon a time in the north of the U.S. They had migrated along, but with the Cherokee. Oh, so, okay. Because the Cherokee, or if people recognize Iroquois, the Cherokee language is an Iroquois language. So they're actually felt to have originated up there in the Northeast, right? And the Osage, different language family, were neighbors of the Iroquoian band. So there we go. So I just thought that was funny that they lived up there and then they migrated. You know, they kind of went down to Kansas and Missouri, right? And the Cherokee went down to the southeast of the U.S. So just interesting. In 1906, the Osage Nation negotiated a deal with the U.S. government that gave full-blood Osage citizens something called mineral trust head rights, where they received quarterly payments based on the mineral estate. That's the term. The way it was arranged, whoever owned the rights passed it on to their legal heir. This deal was made before the oil fields were found as part of that mineral estate. Now, there was some indication there was some oil there. It just, they had no idea. Nobody had any idea the wealth of oil that was going to be discovered there. And I was like, nobody ever addressed, did the Cherokee go, fuck, we sold them that land. So that's how that was all set out. And then the oil gets discovered and it blows up the payments the Osage are receiving, right? They became incredibly wealthy. In fact, several articles said at one point they were the wealthiest nation in the entire world for a while. I read that in the book as well. Yes. They were at least one of, if that is an exaggeration. Yes, they had fuckwads of money. Well, that pissed off white folks. Of course it did. Indians aren't allowed to be rich. They're not even human. So... Here they are. They were running around. They had chauffeurs. They had servants, some of them white. They had jewelry. They had furs. They had all of this stuff. And they were referred to in articles as red millionaires. Because why not be fully racist? In 1923, more than $30 million was paid out to tribal members in an even split. So it was a total of $30 million. I think that was the peak, was that particular payout, and always split evenly. There were only slightly over 2,000 full-blood enrolled members at the time. So that was split between, it was like 22, 23, something like that. This all sounds great, right? Except for the racism part. But the government didn't see Native Americans as competent human beings. Hell, they barely considered them humans in the first place. So what they did was pass a law in 1921 requiring Osage individuals to prove they were competent with money. And the kicker was, if you were full blood, there was no way you could be competent with money. So if they could not prove that they were competent, they were appointed guardians who controlled their money, and they had to get their money from them and have it approved. It wasn't hard to get an Osage declared incompetent. If an individual wanted to use their money, say for a doctor appointment, they had to go to the guardian and ask for their fucking money in the amount they needed. Were these guardians fellow Osage tribal members? Of course not. They were white men, and that's a silly fucking question. Obviously, the system was super easy to game, and plenty of money was already being stolen. A study by the Indian Rights Association, a group of non-natives fighting for the rights of natives at the time, determined that a minimum of $8 million had been stolen from the Osage this way. They actually called it a, quote, orgy of graft and exploitation in their statement. But things got worse, and that brings us to the Reign of Terror. Between the years of 1907 and 1923, Osage tribal members kept dying off. In fact, they were dying at 1.5 times the natural rate. And if you were looking at the national rate, and if you were looking at, say, a bunch of tribal members dying off somewhere now like that, it would most likely be because of poverty. Things related to poverty.
Yes.
Clearly, that is not the source of their deaths here because these people are well off. They can afford what they need. They can afford medical care if they can find a doctor who will give them care because they're not human. These deaths were being attributed to suicide, wasting diseases, indigestion, and bad liquor. Bad liquor.
Well, who made the bad liquor? White man.
But it wasn't bad liquor.
I know it wasn't bad liquor, but I'm like...
What it actually turned out to be was a chain of cover-ups from police to those doing the autopsies when anyone bothered to do one. Even worse, and the method focused on in Killers of the Flower Moon, was the act of white men absolutely flooding the area to marry Osage women, then kill them and their family members off so that they could inherit the money. Those living around the Osage Nation actively schemed and set their sights on specific women who had large properties. Men from outside Indian territory sent letters requesting Osage wives. One letter from a man named C.T. Plimer wrote, quote, I want a good Indian girl for a wife. For every $5,000 she is worth, I will give you $25. This was sent to the Osage Agency. Along came a Texas-born rancher named William K. Hale. He placed himself in the area as a friend of the tribe, calling himself King of the Osage Hills. He had a ton of money and clout in the area, a lot of political clout. His nephew, Ernest Burkhart, was easy to manipulate. Ernest had met Molly Kyle already, an Osage woman. He was a World War I veteran turned cab driver. Hale got him to marry Molly in 1917. She thought they were in love, and they lived together on their ranch in Fairfax, having 3 kids together, 2 girls and 1 boy, and Molly's mom moved in with them and stayed with them. Then Molly's family members started dying off. Her sister, Anna Brown, died by gunshot in May 1921. A man named Charles Whitehorn was found in a similar area, also by gunshot, not related to her. Molly's mom, Lizzie Q. Kyle, died in July 1921 of a mysterious illness, now believed to have been poisoning, but probably called bad liquor. Lizzie was a big score because she had her own head rights, plus the head rights of her dead husband. Anna Brown, her head rights, the daughter had gone to hers, and another daughter who had predeceased them named Minnie. She had a shit ton of head rights. In January 1923, Henry Roan, Molly's cousin, died by gunshot. His life insurance money went to Hale. Interestingly, his life insurance, not his head rights that I found. But this means Hale had his fingers in that. On March 10th, 1923, someone firebombed Molly's sister Rita Smith's house, killing Rita, her husband Bill, and their housekeeper Nettie, who was white. At some point during all this, Molly tried to hire private investigators, but they were easy to bribe, so nothing turned up. She had money.
Mm-hmm.
With all of them gone, the family had rights and money went next to Molly and Ernest. Molly had been growing increasingly sicker throughout all this. She was wasting away. They didn't know why. Bad liquor.
Oh, someone knew why, but...
But this had all happened incredibly rapidly, and the Osage Tribal Council went to the U.S. government to ask for help in March after the Smith family firebombing. There had also been, just so people know, there were also a bunch of peripheral murders that weren't of people related to them happening at this time, too. And, of course, bullshit reasons for their death that obviously weren't true. The tribe first sent a white oilman named Barney McBride to Washington to try to persuade them to send help. While in D.C., someone slipped a bag over his head, kidnapped him, stripped him naked, beat his head in, stabbed him over 20 times, and left his body in a Maryland culvert. President Coolidge did not send help. Next, the Osage went directly...
What the fuck does he need?
I was like, it's a white dude dead. Aren't you going to be mad about that?
Yeah, and I read the book, and it just was so inflammatory to read.
That's why I haven't read it yet. I was like, I have to be in the mood, but then I went and researched it anyway.
Well, now you can probably
yes. Now I'm prepared.
You are prepared for heinous chuckle fuckery.
Yeah. Next, the Osage went directly to J. Edgar Hoover with his new U.S. Bureau of Investigation.
I remember this.
It was not the FBI yet.
No.
They sent undercover agents to help in an effort to improve their image. They done fucked up a different oil rights thing, and they were looking real bad in the U.S. at that point. And they were like, all right, we'll do it. This was their first ever murder investigation, and they were only in charge of this because the native tribes were under the U.S. Bureau.
Right.
So the team they put together ended up being a lot of frontier lawmen and was headed by ex-Texas Ranger Tom White and one Native American agent. He was probably the only Native American agent in the entirety of the U.S., and I believe Tom White put together this team on his own.
I believe you are correct.
Okay. They first looked into Henry Roan's death because it had occurred in an area where the Bureau had jurisdiction and some of the other ones were questionable. As they carried out their investigation, several names came up repeatedly in connection to the deaths. William K. Hale, Ernest Burkhart, and a bootlegger named John Ramsey. There were two more names that would come up, Henry Grammer and Ace Kirby, both of whom died mysteriously not long after the firebombing, so well before the Bureau got there. The agents interrogated Ernest, who buckled quickly, he went, "What?" Right down. Chicken shit.
Yep.
The problem with using someone who's easily influenceable to help you commit crimes is that they remain easily influenceable. Yes. Ernest told them Ramsey had killed Roan. When the agents then interrogated Ramsey, he told them he'd been hired by Hale to kill Roan. He then went on to confess he'd been part of the Smith family murders as well, once again, headlined by Hale, and that the two dead men I'd mentioned were part of it too. Two more men, Kelsey Morrison and Byron Burkhart, who was Ernest's brother and the last person to have seen Anna Brown before her murder, were also brought in based on confessions. Ramsey did recant after his arrest, but it was too late. All those implicated were arrested in January and April of 1926. The trials would last through November 1929 and get national attention. There were a ton of issues, including hung juries due to jury tampering. Of course, they were from the area. Ernest Burkhart was the first to be convicted, receiving a life sentence at the Oklahoma State Penitentiary in McAlester, Oklahoma, which is where my Cherokee grandpa was born. The city, not the penitentiary.
I was like, wait a minute.
No. His conviction was for Bill Smith's death. Ernest testified against both Hale and Ramsey, and they each received life sentences at Leavenworth Federal Penitentiary. Their convictions for Henry Roan. Morrison got a life sentence for the death of Anna Brown, and Ernest's brother did not get tried as he had turned state's evidence. Ernest, his uncle, and Ramsey all got paroled at some point, but I'm not sure about Morrison. There really wasn't much about him. He was peripheral. He was already in prison for something else when he got his life sentence, so he may not have gotten paroled, because he was already on there. After his parole, Ernest and a woman blatantly robbed his sister-in-law, Lily Morrell Burkhart, and he ended up back in prison until 1959.
Oh,
he was special.
What a Rhodes Scholar he was.
In 1965, Henry Bellman, the governor of Oklahoma, pardoned Ernest for having helped the prosecution during the cases. Because he basically was throwing everybody under the bus. And then he went to, after his conviction, he was at each trial testifying.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was no motivation for him to lie. I mean,
right. It should be noted that in 1925, a federal law was passed that kept non-Osage individuals from inheriting head rights from tribal members who were half Osage or more. If you were less than that, I guess fuck you. But that was the government trying to stop the rampant murders happening. Sadly, Molly and Ernest's youngest child died during his trial of whooping cough. She was 4 years old.
Oh.
It's been debated whether Ernest ever truly loved Molly or not. She got better after he was gone because she was being poisoned. It's also believed, though, that Ernest himself would have been offed by Hale, likely through Ramsay, so that he would inherit all the head rights Molly and Ernest had inherited, had this not gotten the attention it did. The tribal council and federal government stepping in stopped him in his tracks. Their granddaughter, when talking to Martin Scorsese, who's made the movie, felt that he had loved her. Like, she was like, let's remember that they were in love. And it's like, oh, honey, sweet summer child. I understand why you need to think that.
Yes.
But somebody was poisoning your grandmother.
Yeah.
And it was probably him.
It was probably your grandfather.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So other Osage do not agree. They're like, bullshit. Like, he never loved her. And I'm all, well, they were clearly getting it on every once in a while because they had 3 kids. But we'll certainly never know.
No.
Molly believed he was innocent until he made his confession in court. Imagine how that felt.
Oh, God. That's horrible.
Yeah. She divorced him and eventually got remarried to John Cobb, dying at 50 years old in 1937. Ernest, that fucker, lived until 1986 because evil lives forever.
Yeah. Tends to.
He got to be way older than she did. The official headcount of Hale and his minions is considered to be 24 by the federal government. That's how many they feel just those individuals killed. There were other individuals killing people too.
That didn't get the press, didn't get the attention, didn't get the investigation.
Nope, no investigation. It's strongly suspected that the high rate of deaths before these 24 and a continuing high death count after the convictions were part of the ongoing murder of Osage individuals to steal their head rights. The Osage Nation estimates the number to be around 60 from their own research and investigations. Some think it's closer to 100 and that the 60 doesn't touch it. A man who appears to have gotten off scot-free was Arthur Woodward. Going to throw out a different guy who's not going to be in the movie or the book. An attorney who got himself appointed guardian over 5 Osage individuals. A lot of these people who were appointed guardians were lawyers who flocked to the area when they found out.
Of course.
All of those 5 individuals died by 1923, except Sybil Beekman Bolton, who died in 1925 at only 21 years of age. Her grandson would later look into the death due to conflicting stories and 2 different supposed causes of death and would write the book Bloodland, a family story of oil, greed, and murder on the Osage Reservation. I never saw a reference to I was looking at this and I'm like, it was basically like a sleeper cell. Early on, you know what I mean? Like they all came in there and married in and got their roots in, and then they attacked, right? Yep. Like it's not technically a sleeper cell, but that's what it made me think of.
I see the similarity.
There were men colluding to rip off the Osage, and the way they did it was to marry an Osage woman and burrow in, act like they loved her, have children with her. How sick is that? All the while scheming to kill off family members to get access to the money. Doctors in the area were complicit, providing the poison, for example. The police looked the other way. The medical examiner used putty to fill in bullet holes at times and declared bullshit causes of death.
I remember that in the book.
Falsified death certificates. It was a large-scale conspiracy in the region. A white woman who had married an Osage man, not for his money, like they were actually in a marriage, reported hearing men in town assigning each other what women to go after. Okay, I'm going to go for Minnie here. Yep. You go for Stacy, and you know.
Disgusting.
They all worked together to commit the crimes and to cover them up, figuring no one would care. And the thing is, no one did. Not for years, until it reached this really extreme point. In all, people died. People lost their family members. Molly's children had no aunts, uncles, or grandparents because of their father. And ultimately, the bulk of the Osage wealth was stolen from them. Millions and millions of dollars stolen, then lost in the Depression. And now they're no longer a wealthy people and haven't been for a long time. Though their numbers have gone up, just as with other tribes, much of their history, tradition, and language have been lost along with that money. It was starting to be lost when they were getting all that money.
Yes.
The tribe has been raped and pillaged in many ways, and it's only big news now for a little bit because a movie came out based on a book written by a white dude. The U.S. Bureau of Investigation billed the Osage $20,000 for the investigation, by the way.
What?
Yep.
That's insane.
In 2011, the Osage and U.S. government settled a lawsuit concerning the mishandling of their trust assets for $380 million, the largest settlement given to a U.S. tribe ever.
Wow.
Talk about the Cherokee being sappy, and they are. But the Osage, money-wise, have done very well. I mean, just to go back to the $20,000 billed by the Federal Bureau, that was them also trying to eke out the money.
Mm-hmm.
David Grant's book, Killers of the Flower Moon, has gotten a lot of attention and is quite successful, but I highly encourage supporting actual Osage tribal members like Fred Grove, who wrote several books, including Flame of the Osage, and the book I mentioned above, which was written by Dennis McAuliffe. Those are both Osage people who have written about it. Read their books, not some white dude. I have nothing against the dude. I'm not even going to say his name. The dude who wrote this. It bothers me, though, that it takes a white guy to get anybody to listen. Mm-hmm. And he's making, now, is he not capitalizing on what happened to them as well? Mm-hmm. Yes, he is.
Because
technically, so is Scorsese.
He got a chunk of, and Leonardo.
Yes, so please.
He got a chunk of change for
Check out Bloodland, A Family Story of Oil, Greed, and Murder on the Osage Reservation by Dennis McAuliffe instead.
Bloodland? I read the book, so
Bloodland.
Now I got to read the real book.
So sources, Oklahoma Historical Society, Time, Fresh Air via NPR, the Osage Nation website, osageculture.com, history.com, BBC, and probably a little at Wikipedia, but the bulk of it was not from there. So, there we go.
I'm writing it down.
Dennis McAuliffe. Yeah, so it's upsetting because the thing is, it's really not that much different now. There's just nothing to exploit out of them.
I found it an infuriating book to read because of the subject matter. I'm like, how can you just so dispassionately tell this story and not just be frothing at the mouth and wanting to punch somebody?
Yeah, and I will say, I'm not saying don't support this guy who wrote this book and all of that.
I get that.
People have liked the book, so clearly it's a good one. I'm just saying, maybe spread a little of that wealth to the people who are descendants of those who actually went through it.
And lost
He
their
did
lives.
throw himself into researching it. You know, like he did put the time and effort in. He cared enough to do that. And I doubt he thought, I'm going to make a ton of money and get a movie off of this. So, to be clear, there we are. I'm not saying fuck this dude. I'm just saying maybe support the people who were destroyed by it instead of the people who did the destroying, technically. And that's it.
That is a wise and good thing to say.
We will talk to you guys later next week.
Are we out of time? We are out of time, aren't we?
Yeah.
I can't read it from here. So.
Why? Do you have something you wanted to say?
I'm like,
it's an hour 3.
3. Not bad.
No,
I don't. I don't have anything to add. I'm like, I said I'm not your smart friend today. And I used up my brain cell earlier on the laughing dude. So.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Artie Johnson.
Sorry. I'm just going to sit here and drool a little.
Cool.
Maybe.
Next episode. Might be a killer.
Who the hell knows what'll come up on the next episode.
Thank you guys for listening. Check us out on buymeacoffee.com/mmmayhem if you want to support the show. Financially in any way, it goes toward, we're not making money, believe me. That would just go toward, say, our podcast host.
Yes.
And our website hosting fees. So, thank you.
Thank you. We'll talk to you next week.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Mysteries, Monsters, and Mayhem.
Find us on Facebook and Instagram or at our website, mysteriesmonstersmayhem.com.
Please like, rate, and review, follow, and share wherever your favorite podcasts are downloaded.
Thank you for listening and supporting our podcast. We'll be back next week with more shenanigans.